Kick this thing off then. Welcome, everybody. My name is John Kottkamp. I'm the Chief Marketing Technologist. Hopefully that's maybe a new title for you for a customer experience agency, Tazoo. Our session this morning is native advertising. Digital advertising industry gets serious about better advertising. So we're going to want to explore what serious means, and we're going to want to explore what better means. And maybe we'll explore some other strange things too. I want to introduce the panel real quick. I have, and then I'm going to turn it over. I'm just going to introduce who they are and then let them, everybody introduce themselves. We have Benjamin Chen, the President of Consumer Products Group of Sonovation. James DiGiulio, President and Co-founder, Chief Product Officer of Tongle. Aaron Levitz, SVP of Wattpad. Tim Waddell, Director of Product Marketing and Advertising Solutions for Adobe. Debbie Meenan, Head of Video Business Development for Federated Media. And Mitchell at the end, the CEO of June Group. So, German, maybe I'll start things out and let you kind of give your minute or two overview of actually who you are and why you're here and what you care about and maybe even what your company does.
Thanks, John. Hi, I'm Benjamin Chen. I'm the President of Consumer Products for a security company called Sonovation. We're doing some cool stuff that you'll hear about with fingerprints and things that help you log into websites later. But more importantly for this panel, prior to that, over the last, I'd say 13 years, I've run a number of different companies in the content space. Most importantly, I ran a company called Mochilla. Mochilla was the world's leader in syndicating content and combining that with brands and putting that on the line. We basically syndicated articles, photos, and video from every wire service in the world, as well as we had a team that created original content. And we did that for brands like British Petroleum, Toyota, Cadillac, etc. And also, I was one of the key people that helped start a company called Vigil, which is in the social media television space. And I have a great appreciation there, again, for content and brands.
Thank you.
I'm James DiGiulio. I'm the founder of a company called Tongle. If you don't know us, it really is like a studio on demand. We've got a technology platform that connects mostly advertisers, but movie studios and nonprofits as well, to a network of 50,000 writers and directors in every kind of corner of the globe. And they create everything from TV commercials to specific small pieces of content for YouTube. Recently, we created a feature-length documentary and are doing a bunch of really interesting things. I'd say I'm here probably because I've created more ads in the last year than any of the holding companies through our network for, McDonald's, P&G, Lego, Budweiser, whomever, all trying to find a solution to this advertising problem where you can't just make an expensive film for TV anymore and expect the world's going to follow. So probably have a unique perspective.
Hey everyone, my name's Aaron Levitz. I work for a company called Wattpad. I'll do the show of hands. Has anyone heard of a Wattpad before? It's getting better every year. So Wattpad is actually the world's largest network of storytellers and readers. We're a social network for writers and readers who are coming to tell anywhere from original fiction, fan fiction, nonfiction, to the extent that we have about 35 million monthly active users coming, about 9 billion minutes spent per month. And to put that in perspective, about every minute of every day, 24 hours of reading goes up on Wattpad. Surrounding that is beautiful images, amazing video trailers. If you go on YouTube and search Wattpad, our fandoms are making hundreds of thousands of videos about the stories that are being written. And why I'm here today is about 6 months ago, we launched our native advertising platform, which is bringing brands in very selective methods to our community to be able to tell amazing stories, whether it's around themes that are important to them, causes that are important to them, but really finding ways to engage with our 35 million users.
Cool. Hey everybody, Tim Waddell. I work for Adobe. I'm assuming you know that.
Just to interrupt for just, can everybody hear us all the way to the back?
No.
All right? No. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So Tim Waddell, work for Adobe. I'm assuming you know us for the creative side of the business for applications and things like that, Photoshop. But Adobe also has a very large business on the digital marketing side, which is analytics, site optimization, and advertising optimization, which is what I work on. And I've been in the ad business for wow, far too long. Started in digital around 97. So, but I've seen the agency side, the sales side, the product side. So interested in this topic just because it's kind of a, advertising is about being unique experiences with engagement, but also trying to drive scale. So that's kind of our point of view.
Hi, I'm Debbie Menon. I work at Federated Media. My job is to really head up the video business development at the company, work with all of our salespeople to create branded entertainment content. And Federated Media, if you're not familiar with it, is somewhat of a conglomerate of websites where we have bloggers, authors, and people that post content. And it's all a content marketing company. But the company was just bought out by Lynn Media this year. And that company was just bought out by General Media. By the end of the year, we'll be the second largest television station group in the country as well.
Hello, Mitchell Reichut. I am CEO of a company called June Group. Name of our company, JUN, means truth, and I founded it out of my house many moons ago with this idea that advertising should be transparent and tangible, and that clients, when they spent money on it, should actually know what they got. So we do two things. We get millions of people to see branded video. Typically, it's a little longer, 60 seconds to 3 minutes long. And we also drive traffic to websites. Our clients are a number of Fortune 500 brands. We have offices in New York, Chicago, and a few people out here on the West Coast as well. Yeah, it's going.
Okay. Very good. Okay, thank you. Once again, our session is on native advertising. The session will be about 75 minutes long, which gives us enough time to be able to not only kind of zig and zag a little bit around some discussions, but also to make sure that it's a very interactive session. So we've come up with a set of kind of thought starter questions that will work with the panel. But what we want to do is really be able to, if we could go off of that and get a good, healthy discussion going, as well as we would like. One of the advantages of having a relatively small audience rather than a giant hall is we've got the right number that you people can be participatory in the things as well. Yeah.
Debbie, this is a question for you right from the very beginning.
Don't be shy. Step right up.
Oh, no.
We've known each other for a while. We saw each other many years ago at NAPI, and we're back when you were with Parade. Based on the fact that, to me, this group, there should be standing room only, because there's only 3 ways that you can actually make money in our industry. It's, by ticket, by advertising, or by subscription. I don't know why there isn't a packed room here. What do you think the reason is that more people who are in this digital space don't understand the value of what advertising is about?
Wow, that's a great question. Should we tie it back to native advertising?
We'll start out with
Do you want to kind of moderate the panel?
But
John, sorry, you lost your spot.
yeah.
I said I felt like this panel looks more like a congressional hearing.
I
Really
yeah,
just
that
started
was-
off the right way. That
Yeah,
can't comment.
yeah. So it starts out from them asking us. But sure, I think that's in fact, although actually, could I hold that for a moment, and then that we could come back, because I'd like to kind of, that's a very good question to kind of think about within the context of our specific topic about native advertising. How does that fit into the larger question? So Debbie, that gives you a couple minutes to be able to think of that brilliant, erudite answer.
It's Monday morning. That's why it's not packed.
Okay. And I just wanted to, take a second to give my more full introduction as well. Again, my name is John Kottkamp. As I said, my company is Tazoo, and since everybody else has kind of done, okay, how many of you ever heard of Tazoo? That's what I kind of thought of. We're based in Washington, D.C., and Richmond, Virginia, London, and I'm out of our Seattle office. I'm a little bit the odd man in this group because we're a customer experience agency. We're focused on working with Fortune 500 companies to kind of look at what that end-to-end customer experience is and to help them deliver relevant contextual content to drive those experiences. But that kind of starts at the beginning of the funnel around the advertising and goes all the way through to the end, the kind of retention and loyalty, turning customers into brand advocates, where they're then contributing their own content. So it's kind of, there's branded content on one side, there's customer generated branded content on the other side. When we look at it, and I think one of the themes that I wanted to kind of talk to, which I think addresses your question just a little bit, is in this whole notion of advertising. And again, I'm looking at it more from this customer experience standpoint, is we like to drive forward what we call the fair exchange, which is basically, it is up to us as, brands to be able to deliver and satisfy what the customers are, what consumers are looking for, whether that's information, entertainment, shopping, research. They're engaging with the brand for some set of purposes. And it's up to us to engage that with them. And in exchange, if we do our job well and engage with them, then we can ask them to do things like buy things, engage with it. At a very simple level, in a B2B world, it may be as simple as register with something. It may be a like in the social world. So what we're talking about today really is that beginning of that journey, which is how to engage people. We've all heard all the statistics about, a gazillion images that everybody sees every day, and we're all had nationally ADHD, and everything is kind of blotting out. But we want to kind of focus on one particular area of how to capture that attention, and that's around the idea of native advertising. So just to begin with, I thought we discussed in the panel before we had a conversation of asking, what does everybody think native advertising is? Because it's one of those buzzwords that has a lot of hype. So we started out with, we thought we'd start and go to that, that oracle of perfection and absolute truth. We Googled Wikipedia. So this is what Wikipedia, what they call native advertising. They said it's an online advertising method in which advertiser attempts to gain attention by providing content in the context of the user's experience. Native ad formats match both the form and function of the user experience in which they are placed. The advertiser's intent is to make the paid advertising feel less intrusive and thus increase the likelihood of users that they will click on it. The word native is used to refer to the formatting of the advertising materials to make them appear more consistent with other media in the recipient's universe. Okay, so that's a Wikipedia, and I think we kind of generally said, yeah, that feels reasonable. But I wanted to share one other thing, because there was another piece that came up recently that if any of you saw recently, John Oliver and his HBO show, last night, this week, took on native advertising. And it's an 11-minute segment, and it is absolutely beautiful. I would refer, if you haven't seen it, I would refer all of you to go see it. I obviously, for this purposes, did not go to 11 minutes, but tried to simplify it. Oh, sorry.
Print publications have struggled to attract advertisers, partly because traditional banner ads are so ineffective that one study found we only intentionally click on them less than 0.2% of the time. Native advertising before. You have probably been subjected to it by now. It's when a piece of ostensibly normal content is stamped with tiny disclaimers like this and this, and then contains messages that are often clear endorsements. And if you'll excuse me, I'll just take a break from making this point by enjoying the refreshing taste of Mountain Dew Code Red. And then it's at this point that you usually realize, oh, this isn't the thing that I was looking for. You're just advertising the most disgusting drink ever manufactured. In which case, I'd like to make a suggestion. If our news is going to be corrupted, we should at least get something in return. Every time a corporation sneaks advertising into our news and ruins it, our news should be allowed to sneak into their advertising.
When you get hot, you get thirsty. And when you get thirsty, there's only one choice. Diet Coke.
The recent Ebola outbreak has killed over 700 people in West Africa. The World Health Organization says they don't yet have it under control, and the situation threatens to become catastrophic.
So that's John Oliver's take on native advertising. So I guess I would ask the the panel what they think, and really, do you agree or disagree that it is this blood-sucking force that's going to, destroy journalism and editorial purity, or is it the latest nirvana of advertising in the way to kind of create great customer experiences? Mitchell, why don't we start down at that end and start with you first?
Yeah, I'm not so concerned about it being a global force in our lives. I think it's been around for a long time. We're chatting before. Some people have called it advertorials. Essentially, the way I would define it, it's advertising that's meant to blend in with the content, and therefore supposedly be more attractive. I think that over time, you're going to see native advertising be just part of the display advertising landscape. I think it will be commoditized. I think it will not be such a big deal this time next year. But I do think there's value in it. I don't think that it is the main force corrupting news. There are plenty of other things doing that, although publishers, I think what Mr. Oliver is referring to are struggling, I think, business-wise to earn a decent living on the internet, and that's sort of a larger problem. But I think that a lot of our clients like it because it's more prominent. It's situated in a place where it's visible, and it's in environments that make them comfortable. When we say to a client, you're going to have a native ad on this series of publishers, it makes them feel like they're getting some value out of that, and we tell them exactly where it's going to run and so forth.
Yeah, why don't we just work for this question? We'll work our way down across here.
Just for some context, I used to work at Variety a long time ago, and that whole editorial advertising state of the union was a big deal. And as we kind of pursued the landscape has changed so many years later, I was at Parade and we used to start selling these advertorials, and advertorials were just simple brands trying to create context that looks like advertising. And if you think about the way the online world has worked and all the display advertising, the homepage takeovers and the ads on the rail, you're inundated with these ads that are now, it's almost too much. And so the question is, how do consumers consume this type of content now? And are they viewing those display ads? And yes, the answer is they still are. But I think brands and marketers are trying to have their ads look more organic in an environment that is more contextual, that it feels more literally native in an environment in the ad unit. So I think as far as describing what is native, the question is, it's really not a question, but it's still not exactly defined. The IAB has an industry standard with it, which we can talk about in a little bit. But, for right now, just think about it as an advertiser that is trying to create an environment that is natural and organic to their brand in an editorial well or along those lines.
So when you were at Parade, did the advertorials, did the purchasers of those, did they feel like it was delivering more value than a traditional ad? Or
that's a good question. The answer is yes and no. You can't measure magazines like you can, the digital online version. The question is, now today, can we do click-through rates? Can we see, what kind of views the video may be getting? And I think it's more measurable now than it is back then. But I think the advertiser liked the concept back then because it was a new way of advertising.
Yeah. It's funny because I think about the magazine space, I'll look through a travel magazine and it'll be like every editorial features on Tuscany in South Africa. And they'll be like, what's this piece on Nebraska? And it's like a special advertising section. I'm always like, all right, well, I feel like it's disgenuine. I don't really care anymore.
But that's why they have to disclose it. Special advertising section, advertorial, or even they need to disclose it now online as well.
The couple examples of you guys, I think it's the New Yorker did the thing for Netflix, and it was an article basically about the women's prison system. And it was obviously sponsoring Orange is the New Black. And I think people view that as a very effective native piece of advertising. It didn't really talk about Netflix much, but it talked about a topic that was, part of the community's issue, and they happened to be the sponsor for a show. And then there's the opposite end, which was the Church of Scientology, who in the Atlantic. So wrong audience, wrong everything, and it was like, oh my God, they pulled it down like really shortly after it went up because it was just a terrible, terrible idea. But the idea of tracking as well is like, how do you track the value of what Netflix got out of that thing? I mean, yeah, there's clicks and there's readerships and all that, but I think this idea of brand is still important, where it's this association with a valuable, article or topic or whatever. So native's interesting. To Mitchell's point, we've been trying to do this forever, right? Back in the 50s, and television sponsored, the news and whatnot. So there will always be this need and desire for this cool, interesting, impactful, relevant piece of content that's happens to be sponsored. And then there's the rest of it, which is just mass scalable reach advertising, which will have both. So
yeah. So interesting enough, the orange is the new black thing in the New York Times.
Yeah,
they did that one.
Yeah.
They actually got a lot of flack for that because, well, it was actually a really interesting article. Netflix wasn't brought up front in it, and so even interesting articles aren't enough to make it good. It still has to be called out in the right way.
Right.
I live in a fun universe where I'm not purporting to be factual at all. My network exists because people want to read and write fiction. So when brands come to us and want to tell stories, I mean, we have our own writers, our own influencers who have hundreds of thousands of followers. We bring those brands to those influencers to write stories that are thematically attached to what they like. Or you'd be surprised how many brand teams write these massive brand briefs around why they chose this color of swimwear this year, but have no way to tell that story and have only told it internally. So it's just a new way for an outlet, but because it's fiction, we don't necessarily run into the same issues that Mr. Oliver got to talk about there. But the other side of native advertising, I mean, coming from a platform, is that you buy it from me. We're not getting into programmatic. We're not letting other people buy placement on our platform, and therefore there's a premium to it. So from someone running a platform, we know the ways, we have the data on what's going on in our network. We know the best ways to reach people. We know what they're reading, what they love, what genres are hot. I can tell you vampires are more powerful than werewolves this week. Last week, I ain't joking, Edward won. If I got the right one, I'm not good with Twilight. But that kind of data is powerful, and you don't get that by going programmatic. You have to come to me. So that's a whole other side of native that often gets missed in that is you don't buy New York Times front page from anyone except someone, either New York Times or someone has a really good deal with the New York Times. Like, we charge more for it.
Look, I think, when I think about native advertising, it's in the content well, right? And we're now migrating from the concept of display or advertising in general. And I think the bar for being in the content well is high. My expectation as a consumer of content is at a place where it can't just be advertising. It has to have value. It has to be relevant. This places a huge burden on the brand because when they actually try to move into the content well, they can damage their brand quickly if they're actually not meeting the expectation of the consumer of the content. And I recognize more people would be able to enter the room if the doors were open back there. Yeah. But, I think that, one of the big issues, if you look at the statistics on any kind of advertorial or any kind of notion that a brand has associated themselves with content, generally are pretty good, right? Generally, you'll get orders of magnitude delta. Orders of magnitude delta in terms of engagement. Redefine that. 10 times better, right? Performance. The problem is you can't scale that because all of a sudden you've taken something that you want to sell to mass market America or to from a very large segment, and now you're trying to figure out how you're going to create something relevant for that segment. And that's very hard to do. And it's very hard to do that in scale. And I think, the bar now for native advertising is so high. Like I'm expecting that whatever video that I see in that content well, if it's native, it better be something that's going to be viral. And I'm part of the reason I'm consuming that content is because I'm also there as one of the first people to actually look at it and be part of that social phenomenon for that content. So I don't think about native advertising as much as I think about it as content. And it puts a burden on brands to be in the content business.
That's because they can't get out of the way.
Well, it's hard.
No, they can't. I work with, as I said, I work with just about every major advertiser, and they all want an edge, but then they want something different. They want something that's content, and then they take once that happens, they don't want it anymore, right? And then because there's so many stakeholders, they don't really know how to do this.
And then try to do that with pharmaceuticals, right? I mean, it just gets harder and harder.
Yes. It's funny. Like I was talking to a pharmaceutical company we were working with. We proposed the idea that they do a partnership with Lionel Richie, because Lionel Richie just, I guess, re-released his greatest hits, and with the song All Night Long, for one of their special products that everyone happens to know. They weren't buying it, but it would have been viral.
But scalability is an interesting issue, right? How many front pages of the New York Times are there? How many promoted stories can I do? There's other ways for brands to get into the content well, as you said. And one of the really powerful ways that we're finding is through curation, not creation. So don't guess what's going to be hot. Look, I can go get some of our biggest native stars. They're going to write stories, and every campaign we've done, the advertising is turned off and the virality is taken over. We've been really lucky because we have phenomenal people in our network. But the fact of the matter is, if you are a big pharma and you want to do stories about All Night Long, guess what? There's probably 50 million on my site. 50 million is an exaggeration, probably closer to 5 to 10 million that you can curate and say, this is my voice, brought to you by. And there's simple association that it's patronage more than anything that you're bringing forward this great content. Because in my network, 24 hours of reading goes up every minute of every day. Brands coming as curators and picking some of the best stuff and taking the time to go through and find some of the best stuff, which a lot can be done through data now. We don't have to guess what the best stuff is, we know. That's a really powerful way that is very scalable for brands, opposed to always creating.
See, I would challenge that from the standpoint of, what my experience has been when I go to a brand, I'm either talking to two people. I've got the agency that basically is routing most of the digital buy to the 26-year-old media buyers, and no offense to the 26-year-olds in the audience. And that is a checklist. It's Google, it's, these top 100 sites is a very deliberate plan, right? So that's going to consume 85% of the budget. Then you've got agency that has specialized tactics and strategy, mobile, all these, and that's hand-to-hand combat, getting into that war room and basically closing one deal at a time, right? And it's great. They're heroic efforts of cool things, but that's hard to scale. And I think from a brand perspective, when you're looking to really try to reach mass audience, it's a cliff drop. And I think part of the issue we have in our business right now is it's getting better. We have more stats, we have more ability to aggregate, and programmatic clearly is doing that. But when it comes to creating high quality content, I just, I struggle. I mean, maybe you can have one or two really killer campaigns, but I don't know if it scales the way that a big brand really needs it to scale.
Maybe that's why we exist.
Yes,
right? So
absolutely.
We have the ability to make really high quality content at scale, to be targeted, to be contextual, to be, I don't think that you're going to spend, there's the famous quote that 50% of my media budget is wasted. I just don't know which 50%, right? So that sucks, right?
I think for television, that's the case. I think it's a lot harder when the insertion order can be canceled 2 weeks into the campaign instantaneously, because I'm not seeing the metrics.
Rob Norman, who is Chief Digital Officer of Group M, said that viral video is sort of like self-immolation. Anyone can do it once. And it gets to your point about scaling that and creating great content. I've been advertising a long time, and there's never been a great percentage of the advertising content ever created that was high quality. A lot of it just, it's difficult to continuously do that. So a lot of our customers come to us because they don't want us to evaluate the quality of the content. They want it to reach the audience for which it was intended. And it's a very different way of looking at things than creating a video that's going to strike some chord culturally and go viral. We did a lot of that business in 2008, 2009. Now our customers come to us and they say, I want 18 to 34-year-old women who like organic ingredients, and we have a video that would never be a cultural phenomenon, but will really resonate with them. And so there's a whole aspect of this business that says, how can you find those audiences and deliver the message that's intended to go to them directly to them?
When we work with our clients, and if we're saying, if you want to get people to the web experience, the best thing is very simply do cute cat videos. They drive traffic by pure views. Cute cat drive almost more traffic than anything. You'll never get a sale. You'll never get a business because they're not contextual, and they're not where we're talking about kind of getting in to be able to drive something that eventually drives to conversion. So I guess a question I would ask the panel is, and
You can open the door in the back too for more.
oh yeah, could somebody reach? Maybe we could, is there any way we could stick something in the doorway to grant that open? So wanted to kind of drill down a little bit in that kind of performance. We're talking about, some of this contextualization, talking about, better targeting, and all of that is we're trying to drive, a specific set of outcomes. So I'm wondering, panel, if we've got any examples of places where there's actually been a program that have some results. I know, Benjamin, you were saying, on an order of 10x, and I think we'd all nod our heads yes, but I'm wondering if we've got any. Debbie, when we were talking, were you saying you've got one kind of case study that's a good example?
Of something we did with Hyundai, and Hyundai was trying to promote their Santa Fe brand, and we actually picked out about 7-8 of our influencers, and we shot videos, and we called it the Hyundai Epic Playdate. And literally at the beginning of the video, it's a shot of the Hyundai car with the mom in the car with her kids, and the Epic Playdate is about taking their kids out on a play date. And so you see the car driving down the road, and then they go to their location, and this entire video of the idea of taking your kids out. So that concept worked really well. We shot 7 videos. We did 150 posts on it, and then we're talking about the idea of scale. The concept is to scale it out. And how do you take that video and put it in an ad unit and run it across our network? We can do that from an ad unit called the Native Conversationalist Unit. So you're taking it and you're putting that context around it. It still looks like an editorial unit, but it's actually now media, and it runs across all of our networks. So it gets the scale that it needs. But long story short, at the end of the day, I think we ended up having like 127 million impressions from the whole campaign. We had a 14,000, what was it? Let me see, 14,000, or it was 40,000 video views. And I think this engagement level was 7 times that higher than we had expected. We did a partnership with Real Simple. We did sweepstakes online as well. And it was a big success. So it was a way to show like all different ways of taking one campaign and having it live across social promotions. It was also an event. It was video. It was text. So anyway, it was a really successful campaign at the end of the day. They loved it.
Tim, do you have, you're the analytics guy of the group. Do you have any recommendations of how people are successfully measuring the impact of some of these things beyond, the basic, impressions?
Right. So, I mean, obviously there's brand and there's direct response. So brand is, that's the touchy-feely side. And we're all looking at, awareness and retention. And, obviously from our point of view, we look heavily at engagement stats. So obviously there's click through and video and all that, but what is the user actually doing? Did they come back? I mean, so at the end of the day, you're really tracking very specific numeric values. But at the end of the day, does it actually do what you want it to do? And that's where it's up to the advertiser to really understand what do they want out of this campaign? Do they want awareness? Do they want to drive sales? Do they want to drive leads? So it ultimately comes to that. And, again, advertising budgets, when you do have both brand and direct response, you're looking to see, are the boats rising across the board, right? If I'm spending money, I want something out of it. So it's, the clarity of here's all the specific digital metrics I'm going to look at. Here's the other softer side of the metrics. All have to lead toward that one event. We think about BMW, it's the ultimate driving machine. It's always been the ultimate driving machine. They've done an amazing job about that, but they still are trying to drive people into dealerships to take test drives and buy cars. So, I mean, we're not reinventing here. I guess that's my point. Is it's always been know what the hell you're doing, have very specific goals, and track them and monitor them.
Well, I would say that, you know, one of the things that we're lacking right now in this business is for the publishers to basically change the way that they manage objects in the content well. And a lot of these systems, if you talk to the big syndicates, whether it's a Tribune or someone like, you know, a large group of sites, they basically organize the sites in such a way that they've already anticipated that editorial sits someplace and advertising sits someplace else, right? So on the right rail, on the header, on the footer, etc., we're going to do these things. And they basically map out in advance the location for their ad ops units to basically have control. But if you actually want to deploy a native campaign that actually takes advantage of all the statistics that we know of tracking, the ability to actually deploy that surgically in the content well, that's a big behavior change within a publisher today. So I would ask folks that are publishers, if you really want to take advantage of this, to really go back and look at how you're actually mapping and how you're actually deploying in the content management systems the ability to actually deploy other objects of content that are actually ads. Because that's really how you're going to take advantage of this. Otherwise, you're going to come back, your ad ops group's going to come back and say, well, we can't do that. You know, we've designed the system to do these things on the template.
That's, I mean, if you look at the traditional publishing world, that's true. But if you look at the platforms where a lot of this content, whether it's us, Facebook, Instagram, we build that in as we're building our platform. I mean, this isn't an issue. And if you don't do it when you're building a platform, you only do a disservice. Everyone throws around this word authenticity. It's probably the biggest word used in native. No one really knows what it means. But the simplest way to gauge it is, did you piss off the people who saw it? And if they weren't pissed off, it was pretty authentic. Kevin Systron, who's the CEO of Instagram, said every ad, when they turned it on, and he's still doing it, he looks at every ad that goes into that stream to make sure it's a beautiful photo that sits on its own. We do the same thing. Nothing goes into our network unless it's a brilliant story. But because of that, we have to know how, where, and why to promote it and know the data behind it. We don't have to build, we have to worry about a sales ops team, you know, screwing that up for us, because we built it knowing that at some point we have to find a way to bring advertising in. And we don't want to do display ads. There's like 2 display ads on all of Wattpad, almost none of which is on mobile, and that's 85% of our usage. We know that we have to be very authentic, sorry to use the word, to be able to bring brands in. So we don't quite have, not everyone has that same issue, but I agree, you know, people who've been doing it for 150 years, like the New York Times, do have to rethink how they're doing things, which means that might not be the best place for native advertising because they're not up to speed like a lot of us other tech networks can be.
Right, and my concern is it's still the reach, right? So I get that if I go to Facebook, which I do that on behalf of just different things that we're doing, you know, as a company today, we have incredible reach, right? And incredible targeting. I can go after a specific consumer segment and say, I'm going to run this particular type of content, and I only want people that are males that basically own houses on the East Coast that love Toomey, right? I can do that. But to get mass reach in this country, right, we need the majority of the publishers. We need people like, you know, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. We need people like this, and we need these folks to basically opt in. Otherwise, it will always still be, you know, in some ways, a very niche kind of, you know, operation. And granted, we're in the early stages.
Just one thing. I mean, the idea of native is that it's unique to that publication. That's why I think that it's an oxymoron to say scale and native, right? It just doesn't make any sense. It just, I want to build something that's really specific to my content, that's with my users. And you know, you're going to have to one-off those. You're going to have to do, you know, 1997, they were doing the homepage takeovers and peelbacks, and it was, you know, whatever. It was like one-off things that, you know, but if you do enough of those, to your point around the agency, they're going to build their reach plan that gets them, you know, the reach and frequency they want, and they're going to go off and take some of their money and do the really cool shit that's going to get the attention, and this stuff's going to bolster it. So we're always going to have that need, but you know, Google's building a programmatic native platform now, and I just find that humorous. Just like, wow, okay, it just sort of goes against the grain of what's trying to be done, which is create really compelling, relevant ads that users actually enjoy and engage with. Just a funny one, but what's it, BuzzFeed? They do lists and all this stuff. One was, how would you die in Game of Thrones? I mean, that's just funny, right? Like if you're Game of Thrones, like, you come up with all these crazy ideas about how you were doing it, but it was unique to them. It caught some attention. It's just, that's the kind of stuff, but it is one-off.
Can I give you an example of how you can use native advertising on a scaled scenario? Back to your Wall Street Journal comment. Part of our company is owned by Lynn Digital, and Lynn Digital has the opportunity to buy advertising on Condé Nast, Hearst, CBS, ESPN, 10,000 different publisher sites. So if on Federated Media, we created this content that an advertiser, an influencer wrote, and it was Deuce, and it was sponsored by Levi's, we can take that content, put it into an ad unit that is now an industry standard for IAB, and put that ad unit and run it across as media across all of Lynn Digital. So the scale can go at any level of targeting anyone would ever want it to. So it's a way to take content marketing and scale it out. And it's in a unit that actually looks like the original post. Okay, you've got a question over there.
So for both you and Tim, Debbie, to follow up on this, I mean, it seems to me that we're talking about legacy media companies who have now gone into the digital space. They still think like magazine or newspaper, and they want to have those spaces. IAB was specifically put into business, and so we could have those kind of national, worldwide ad, and we could talk in the boardroom about where things are going to be placed, so that they could find a way to account for it. So this is really an accounting issue. So the question I have for you, Tim, is if scale is about accounting, if Mr. Chen's suggestion is things have to be scalable, I think what I'm hearing him say is we got to be able to tell somebody who's paying for this, here's how far it's going, here's how many eyeballs and that. So how are you saying if it's not going to be done through an IAB kind of scalability, how would that then be done? What kind of metric entity are you using to keep that information?
Well, anything in a digital format is trackable, right? So you can check unique users, you can check view through, whatever, right? I mean, it's all trackable, which is, in that format, right? But it's the things you don't get are the awareness and the other parts of it, which is part of a broader campaign. But any specific element is, you can tell anything that's happening with that item.
So are you advocating that we don't need an IAB?
No. What the IAB does is creates the standard ad unit size, right? So banner ads, skyscrapers, 300 by 250. It's like, that's the IAB standards. They're trying to do it with mobile. What the native concept is that it's not standard. It is unique to each publisher. And so Debbie's talking about it's interesting, but I view that as a rich media ad. And, it's the same ad unit. The cool thing about the world today is that you can deliver content on the fly, dynamically generate, right? So you can say, here's my image, here's my header, here's my content, whatever, right? You can reformat that in many different ways, which is, I think, what Google's trying to do, right? It's, you deliver it based on what I know about this user or this format or platform, whatever. So you can do that, but it's still, at the end of the day, it's a rich media ad. I mean, the content, and this is what advertising's been always about, is like, make something interesting that consumer cares about. And it has to be the idea and the content, and, it should fit with the publication. That's the best scenario. Every publisher still is out there coming up with, hey, what's my cool thing I'm going to do this month? Or what kind of topic can I go talk to Pepsi or Coke about, or Auto? Hey, they're going to be interested in this idea and I'm going to get them to sponsor it. That's still going to happen. It's always going to happen. But you brought this up earlier. The online news companies are having a hard time making money, and this is the way they're doing it right now. So
do you want to ask your question again that you started off with? I want to make sure we answered it.
Yeah, at the beginning about the general.
Why people aren't here.
This should be a standing alone. I mean, literally, when you think about it, the only way that online is really making any money, and the only way content creators can make money today is through somebody who's involved in advertising. There's not enough pay-per-views for people, unless you happen to be one of the Hollywood elite at the very top, who's part of a larger package for producing or directing or a star, for television. It's just not going to happen unless you're a YouTube star that happened 20 years ago, or one of the ones that's kind of coming up now. but it's very few numbers that's figuring out.
How do you mean? Do you mean as a content publisher,
people,
like the
I don't think people
New York
are
Times
making a living. I mean, what I would consider a living in this country by just going out and shooting and doing content and delivering.
So I mean, I've got a network who basically makes a living doing it.
No, I'm not saying. I'm saying when you look at the numbers, I mean, there are 20,000 people who, submit their films to Sundance.
Right.
There are, hundreds of thousands of people who are putting stuff up on YouTube every day who are trying to become the next whatever. I'm just saying that, when you look at the percentages, it's very small. So if you want to make a living in this, I mean, you need to be in either one of your businesses, or you have to be attracting advertisers to be part of what it is you're doing and be involved with a publisher who is attracting advertisers.
So at the base level, you're basically saying it has to be the ad model to be able to drive the content, to be able to generate the creation. Other than that, the subscription model, exists, but behind the paywall is very small.
We told all our kids the internet is free 25 years ago. And because of that, there's no money. I mean, you can't get my son or my daughter to pay anything other than what I'm paying to get us all online. They're not willing to pay anything, maybe 99 cents for a song they really want to hear. But otherwise, they're going to get from friends, whatever.
Well, I think some app
that's-
developers might take issue with that because, a lot of people that have developed apps for iOS and for Android are doing quite well. There is an advertising model for a lot of that. In fact, I was going to make the point earlier, we're talking about quality publishers. This is like 60%. This is the first screen now. We all pick this up 150 times a day. And this is not the web anymore. These are apps. So 86% of the time that people spend on this device is an app. It's not a website. That is a whole different, we talk about measurability. Guess what? Cookies don't work here anymore. How are you going to measure it? You have to have first party data. So it opens up, it closes off a lot of opportunities because it's a walled garden, but it opens up a number of them as well. And you can make money.
Yeah, I'll say that our network is millennial. So 25 and under is about 70% of the people on Wattpad, which is shocking because most people will tell you that teenagers can't even read anymore, but they're spending 30 minutes a session with us when they pick that thing up. But we know that for things they love, they're more than willing to spend hard dollars on. Whether it's for us, we're doing experiments right now with bonus content, we're calling it. So, one of our writers wrote a story and you want to see an alternate ending or a different character's point of view. They'll pay 99 cents, $4 to read that extra point of view. If you look at other things like messaging apps, like Line, Line makes hundreds of millions of dollars a quarter selling emojis, selling stickers. So people might not want to buy a CD anymore, but saying that this generation, 13 to 25 doesn't want to spend money, they just don't want to spend it in the place that other people used to spend it in. Like they're still willing to follow great content along, but they may not buy a 99-cent track ever again.
I'll add to that.
They won't buy. They're not buying publishers. They're not
It's tough to
buying
get
a
speaking
subscription to
time.
the Wall Street Journal. They're not buying a subscription to a newspaper.
No,
That's what I'm saying. They're not doing. So if we're talking about traditional advertising and advertisers that are doing things, you have to be. That's why I'm saying everybody should be here to hear about what are the things that make it so that they are working. And I'm hearing you talk about some of that. But I'm saying
maybe the worst part about native advertising is when people say it, they only think about newspapers, because that is probably the smaller part of native advertising when you look at what Facebook and Google and
the easiest way to run a native advertising campaign is to go to Facebook and put your credit card in.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like literally, that is the platform, right? If you're of a certain
Are you really
demographic.
right? Are you really asking about monetization now in the digital world and how a company can be successful? And is it all advertising related?
I'm just saying, we're obviously here. There's going to be a whole bunch of more people that are here because the seriousness of advertising is what's going to pay for you as a content creator to do what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, brands. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say one of the issues that we've run into actually is the word native. People don't really look, we have how many smart people up here, and also they let me sit up here, but not really having the exact same definition of native. So when we go talk to an agency or a studio or a brand, they go, well, I don't know, do we do native advertising? And they look around the room like, do we do that? I don't know, do we do native? Yeah, you do it. It's just a new name that Ad Age came up with like 14 months ago. So now it's native advertising.
John, I think you had some other questions out there.
Yeah. I think in the back,
How do you guys perceive the rise of value exchange advertising across the net? How that might play into native advertising? You guys talk about promoted posts. A lot of you guys are talking about on these platforms. So I think that's very separate from native. Native kind of promotion mechanism, right? No different than the content marketing, the rich media units that you're providing. But when you're looking at like long form video content at the front, where you can displace, let's say, 90 seconds of normal linear pre-roll into some sort of like a watch our brand message. You know, North Face dude climbing a wall for 2 minutes as they push some jacket or something. Is that native to you guys? Is that more meaningful?
That's native to me. It may not be native
me
to everybody
too.
else.
We do some of that, and we get great numbers out of it.
The whole conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were talking back. If it's the guy climbing the wall for a North Face, and it's about the travel ad for Nebraska, it may be poorly targeted. You know, the right thing, but the concept is there.
I think it's based on the intention.
Yeah.
Right. So the North Face was like, let's make a badass video of a guy climbing whatever, and we'll put a North Face jacket on. We're trying to entertain people. We're not trying to advertise people. I think that's
Like what
really
Red
it
Bull's
comes
done.
in. What's that?
It's like what Red Bull's done.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that to your point, Diego, it's good to see you. I think that the issue that I look at is you have targeting, you have the great content, and that has to show up in the well, and it has to be directed. So just like, you know, I go to Yahoo or Google, my homepage really there is customized for me already today. I may not know that, but it already is. I want the content well to ultimately be optimized that way. And I think the bar fundamentally should still be from the publisher standpoint that they have to basically re-implement their systems to do that. Otherwise, you're only left with certain choices, right? And I think that's what's possible today. It's the targeting that exists in the right rail can exist with great content in the well.
Yeah, and he's asking about value exchange. So if you're on Pandora and it says, would you like to earn an hour of free music? Just watch this video. You know, there are a lot of units that we have that do that, and they're extremely effective. Brands tend not to like it as much as your standard native unit, which is an editorial, because that's sort of how they've been trained to think about advertising, but they love the results. Consumers love it because it's non-interruptive, and they love to participate in those kinds of environments where they feel like empowered. Nobody's interrupting you. It's just you're choosing to be there. So I personally think there's a place for it.
I'll give an example off our network. One of our writers had not posted. The way you write on Wattpad isn't, you don't write a book and put 250 pages on a shelf. You write serially. You write week by week, you post a new chapter of your story. One of our writers hadn't posted in a while, but we were working with Fox actually around Fault in Our Stars, and they decided they really liked how this writer wrote and wanted them to write a thematic, it was a story about extraordinary love. And we went to her and said, would you write this? Brand wants to be involved. She said, sure. And all we said to her was write about extraordinary love. The beginning of her story was a small version of a pre-roll, a little preamble saying, hey, I'm working with Fox on this. Amazing. Not one of her fans said anything except, OMG, I can't believe you brought my favorite writer back to me. Thank you, Fox. So they're definitely, they don't have a problem if they're getting what they want after it. But like you said, if you're reading about Tuscany and you don't want to read about Nebraska next, no one's going to want that exchange of value.
I wonder what the reaction would be like if it was not Fox and it was like, it was like brought to you by Trident.
So we just did this in the Philippines is our second largest, US is our largest country by far. Philippines are our second. We just did this with Unilever, a brand called Escanol, which is kind of like Clean and Clear. Brought our biggest writer back to the platform. There was the beginning was kind of like Escanol on Wattpad, and followed by, oh my God, you brought Denny back. This is the greatest thing ever. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think there's an enormous goodwill method to it. I mean, if you think about it, right, the television advertising model exists because of the soap opera, which was Procter & Gamble saying, you know, oh, there's all these housewives sitting around listening to the radio and doing their chores, so why don't we just bring them some programming? And that obviously morphed into the model we know today. So if you think about it, one way or another, unless it's subscription-based, HBO, Netflix, and more Hollywood, advertisers are paying for every type of content. So it's just a matter of how, like, why aren't they just willing? I think they will be, because at some point there won't be a choice, but they should be willing to bring, you know, the actual story and just be like, hey, this is from us. And that would create more goodwill than trying to give me the Nebraska advertorial. And
it's patronage, right? It goes back to the court paying Mozart to make music.
Exactly.
No one cared that the king paid him to make music, right? They wanted to hear Mozart's music. We're finding the same thing in our networks.
So we're getting in, it seems like in the discussion, we're very much kind of almost blurring a line that to me seems blurred to begin with between content marketing in this broad, the exchange of value, and native advertising per se, which is trying to draw eyeballs to get them in to potentially have a content marketing experience. So would the panel agree with that? How is it more once you've got them, how you sustain them and how you move them down that funnel toward conversion, that that's the content marketing side, that this rich contextual relevant content plays a role, or is it as much still in kind of a classical ad unit to try to just get that initial attention?
I'll respond real quickly, but it may be a little lengthy. I'm sorry for that. There's the top of the funnel and the bottom of the funnel. The bottom of the funnel is all about more of a direct response, right? So it depends on what the goals and objectives are for the brand on how they want to relay their message. And since there's a lot of confusion in the whole native advertising world, IAB put together a task force of about 100 people in the industry and brought them in, and they created this playbook for native advertising. And they came up with 6 definitions of the types of ad units that are now industry standard for IAB. And it's supposed to simplify things a little bit more, but it'll also show you how it'll run across different formats. And each one of them will have a different objective, where it could be more for direct response, or it could be more for big awareness. So the one that we've been talking about today a lot is in feed, which content marketing is in the editorial well. Another one is paid search. When you go to Google and you want to find out, you want to Google pizza, you could actually go see all these pizza places you can buy pizza from tonight. Those are paid search. That's also known as native advertising. There's recommendation widgets. So there's, links to different places that are off-site. And those links will cause more of a direct response, lower funnel scenario. There's promoted listings. So you can sell all different kinds of shoes, but you make that look like it's an editorial piece. And then there's in ad, which is that native conversational unit I talked about earlier that we have on the right rail that we'll syndicate content with. And then there's other. But it gives you a really good idea that they're trying to put industry standards around this, because you want to make sure that it's authentic and that it's actually tagged, sponsored, or promoted by, or underwritten by, so there's no confusion and it's not manipulating the advertiser.
And there are 2 ways to look at this, John. One way is, how many interactions is that native placement going to get me? I have a video, I'm distributing it, promoting it via native placements, 2%, 3%, 5% are clicking, and I'm getting this engagement, which is great. The other way to look at it is, I'm putting these native placements in the content well, and how many impressions am I getting? And I'm going to buy that on impressions. And our advertisers tend to look at it both ways, or one or the other. We always sell on the engagement because that's just our predilection, which isn't to say that impressions aren't valuable. Our clients value them, so they are. But it's 2 different ways that brands, I think, approach it.
Why impressions are valuable, because it's the way the 26-year-old media buyer, we still have 26-year-olds, right? Decide that. It's the way they buy, right?
For another year.
It's one of the ways.
When they're 27, I'm done with you. But at 26, but we have to do that, right? Because
no, they'll buy it on cost per engagement. I sell it to them. They're 24 sometimes.
Oh, I got to go low.
Yeah,
see, there's my problem.
That's
why you're here.
Exactly.
But it is. I mean, you look, the way we look at native advertising is all parts of the funnel, because we're new. Like, people still are getting their heads around, what do you mean people are reading again? That doesn't make sense to people. So we look at everything from the very simple CPM all the way through to, engagement, time spent reading, shares, views, all these other amazing things. So, but we do have to look at the whole funnel for that reason. We need to find ways to sell to 26-year-olds. Now I got to figure out how to sell 24-year-olds. Thanks, man.
We'll talk.
Because this is still, we're hearing a lot of kind of, it's coming out a little bit of different definitions, different way of approaching it. Debbie was just telling us about, some standards that were kind of proposed by IAB. Should there be standardization? Is that, or Tim, you were kind of saying early on, it almost has to be non-standardized by definition.
Search advertising is native, really?
Check it out. Search paid
search. Yeah, I don't know. I think, again, it comes down to the publisher. I mean, you have a unique offer, right? You have a great, there's value there. They're there for to be with the writers, and the writers are creating content around what an advertiser is requesting, and that's right. That's great. That to me is native advertising. That's like, I'm creating something on behalf or in conjunction with this advertiser to meet their goals. And then, I mean, there's the reach and frequency side, which is, search is amazing. Search is the greatest direct response ever. Like intent driven. I'm looking for a new bike. I go search. It's awesome. But you need to drive intent as well sometimes. And that's what brand advertising, display advertising, and all that does. I want to tell someone they need a new bike. So they go search for it. I don't care if search got the deal. I need to tell them. But we're going to have all that. And I think, native will probably change the name in 6 months. I don't know, whatever, again. So, I just find it like, again, working with the publisher specifically around what they offer and their engagement with their user base. What does that mean? And how do I attract them? How do I talk to them?
Yeah, if you put 100 people in a room to define something, you've already missed the next 4 things that it's the biggest problem.
Yeah, especially 100.
IAB hasn't talked about us yet. I mean, I love them because my terms are much easier because of them just attached to the back. But yeah, I think that's the biggest problem when you try to create standards. There will be, especially in the world today, there's already 4 networks that are probably cropped up during this talk that, I don't know about, none of us know about yet. So.
I know we've been kind of focusing up here a little bit, wanted to kind of give some more of a chance because I had seen at different points, a couple other hands raised. Anything from the gallery, from the audience that would like to? Yes, please.
Just a quick question. If someone could go into a little bit more specifically the KPIs, what the kind of measurements that are appropriate for this kind of native advertising? Is it different to some of the other types of reporting? Just a little bit more detail in terms of what, clicks or shares or other things that we don't know about.
We get a whole range of them. Sometimes it's cost per acquisition on the very bottom. Sometimes it's CPMs on the top and impressions. Other times it's video views. Other times it's drive people to Facebook or take an action after, drive people to my site. How long are they spending on the site? The good thing about this is it's not pre-roll, right? It's not just this spray and pray kind of advertising. It has the capability to do all these things. That's why it's so confusing, because it gives you this range. Our clients come to us with all these things, and of course we can handle all of them. Not a problem. But all kidding aside, you sort of deliver on the promise of the internet, which is to have deeper communications, and it's messier that way, but it creates opportunities as well as confusion.
Did that help?
Clear it right up.
So we're a unique network. There's nowhere else in the world. There's not a lot of other networks in the world where you count reads as a metric. So one of the challenges we have is actually working with CPMs, engagement time and all that, and then layering on our metrics on top, because a lot of times our partners are like, so what does that mean? So we actually look at things like expansion of social reach. So if you have 40,000 Twitter followers for a movie and we have 50,000 followers on your Wattpad profile, we've added 110% to your earned media reach. So we look at metrics like that as well. We compare reads to likes because we know a read is way more engaging than a like. So if we have about the same amount of reads as you had likes, we've added significant social aspects to your campaign. So I think that's, Tim bringing up that a lot of these the best native experiences will be unique, means there are also unique metrics, which comes with its own challenges. How do you get people to put that into their giant universe of continuum of data?
Native advertising equals native KPIs.
Yeah.
And I know when we work with people, again, as I was saying kind of at the beginning, it's trying to connect that whole funnel of that experience. So it is a little bit, whether it's cost per acquisition or whatever the definition of a conversion event, and then be able to kind of work your way backwards to see how are you having that impact in addition to kind of the traditional reach and things like that. Great. Anyone else out there?
Sean Kelly, do you have any questions?
Don't tell me. Okay, there, yes.
Aaron, I love that you keep talking about sort of the users and the influencers. We do the same thing, but on Pinterest. I'd love to hear sort of from the different panels how that plays, an influencer contributing rather than just an ad segment, because they're totally different ways of looking at native advertising. How do you feel about it? How do you sell clients on it? I know that since we're only selling Pinterest, it's a native sort of metric that they're looking for. But when you're thinking about scale, and all these brands want to sell way more and reach way more, how do you use the influencer as part of that?
I think the Hyundai example that I gave earlier, were you here when I mentioned it?
Yeah.
It was the idea if we chose 7 influencers that we thought were the right audience for the Hyundai Santa Fe. And we actually thought about all of their goals and objectives, and then we looked at who our influencers were in our network, and these people were chosen based on, you know, targeting demographic, feel, and then approved by Hyundai. So you actually go in and you pitch them to the client, and then the client will choose, okay, that makes sense. Then we'll also give them a list of bloggers, authors, and posters, people that will write about it. And so then the client will approve it as well. And then we'll create the whole experience. But, you know, it's going back to that comment earlier. It sounds small, but like I said, it can be syndicated across a bigger, larger network. You take that exact content, you take that video, you can post that video on Facebook. You know, you can continue to evolutionize the whole concept of the video and the content marketing piece.
For us, we push it for a few reasons. A, we find it important for ways to help our writers make money, and they make money on these things, and that's real. They're our biggest investors. Without them, we don't have 35 million readers. But it's hubris for a brand to come into our network and go, oh yeah, I can write in your network. We have a team of copywriters. No problem, we got this. It's not true. And especially in the early days, we go work with our influencers, and because they know how to write for our audience. That means the pronoun you can sometimes be spelled with one letter. That's okay. You might miss a few commas here and there, or all of the commas in some cases, but you have to work with those influencers to be authentic. Like, you know, if Unilever came in and did the Seskinol thing without our biggest writer, it would have gotten no traction at all. That being said, there's a scalability issue with that. You know, there are only so many influencers in our network. So it's great because we can go back to them and help some of them make money. We have to find ways to make new influencers within our network, which is a whole other issue. But curation steps in at that point to make it scalable, which if you're working in Pinterest works great. You know, we can curate stories around what's important to the brand, which means they can take, you know, stories that are already big, might already have 500,000 reads, 1 million reads, 100 million reads, and be the patron of that story without actually have to work directly with the influencer. The influencers still get compensated for it, but it's a scalable way to do that, is curation versus creation, we say.
We replaced influencers with machines. It's all programmatic. We deliver audience. I love influencers, and I love the whole viral nature of things, and it's great when you can deliver it. Just for our company, we decided to go in another direction, just to give you perspective, so that it's much more of an audience buy with us, and a combination of you can run on specific publishers if that makes you comfortable. But we don't rely on influencers. It's just the technology.
Yeah, you would.
Isn't one of the key issues overt versus covert? Isn't that where the issue of authenticity comes up? So, for example, I subscribe to the New York Times. I pay for it. This weekend, there's a really nice fat thing all about watches. It says special thing. I'm not expecting editorial, authenticity in that. I'm expecting lots of ads, lots of articles, all the rest of it. If that article, if I'd read the New York Times on the Friday, and not with that thing, and they go, oh, there's a great new watch from La-di-da, I'd expect that to be talking to me with the truth of that writer, not being a layup for an ad, and I turn the page and there's the ad. Now, so that's the New York Times. If I'm on an airline and I'm looking at the glossy Maggie there, I'm not expecting for any moment that there's, blinding Pulitzer Prize winning journalism coming at me. I expect to see 2 pages later, after what amazing holiday someone had in Puerto Rico, an ad for Puerto Rico. But so you were talking about somebody who said, okay, I'm writing this article because Fox is paying me to do that. And no one has a problem with that. As a matter of fact, that's just like a great weight off everyone's shoulders. And now you can just go off. And if you want to talk about Fox in it, great. And if you don't, you don't. But if you don't bring that up and it's kind of sneaky, don't you have this massive backlash? For example, I did not read the article about the women in prison thing in the New York. That would piss me off if I was paying for a quality piece of journalism.
I agree. That's the big issue.
We agree. Absolutely.
Yeah, everybody agrees.
Where's that sliding scale where you go, this is going to be covert, this is going to be overt? Is it always overt?
I think if it's covert, you're not advertising, you're issuing propaganda.
If money is being paid for the content, then it should be very obvious.
Was the orange is the new black content obvious?
No,
that's the point.
Not at all.
Yeah, like literally the way it was obvious is they had faceless figures. One was orange, one was black, one was orange, one was black in a lineup walking into prison, but no mention of orange is the new black. So, you know, when John Oliver brought up, you go, oh yeah, obviously, but
it's not supposed to work like that. It's supposed to always be made obvious. And that's one of the barriers. That's one of the table stakes to play in this game is you're supposed to say this is an advertisement, and yet we're going to make it so valuable that you'll enjoy it. Not everybody does it.
You know, I used to work at Machinima, which is one of the largest entertainment channels on YouTube, and we did a whole Twitter feed campaign. We wanted to work with NBC when they're promoting the TV show Hannibal. And so we hired these influencers to send out a tweet, watch Hannibal with me tonight at 10 o'clock. And we ended up sending it out. I think they had about 18 million view impressions the next day, and Sean right there was the one behind it. But today, I think that there's more regulation around how to use Twitter. So you need to say, watch Hannibal with me tonight at 10 o'clock. I was paid, you know, Fox paid, or NBC paid me for this, yeah. So you have to actually disclose the sponsor on it. It's actually the FCC, I think, FTC is behind it. So it's regulated now, and the Twitter feeds it's fairly important to make sure that advertisers are being, you know, disclosed.
Microsoft and Nokia got in trouble from the FCC about 6 months ago, I believe. So,
so is it always like that then?
I would say going forward in the future, it will be more like that.
It gets abused for sure, but it shouldn't. And I think that as it becomes more standard, first of all, I have this theory that it's special right now and it's new and it's different, but it won't be, because I'm old enough that I was doing this stuff when banner ads were special and new and they got 10 and 15% click through. So as I said up front, I do think this will be commoditized, you know, get more used to it, and users will get the same banner blindness from this that they get from everything else. So it's incumbent upon us to find ways to make the content interesting. It's a real challenge because you have scalability versus making special content. You don't want to interrupt people, but you do kind of, and you know, those are just sort of the knobs and dials that you have to turn to get a good program. But you always want to be upfront about what you're doing.
So do all of your writers then on Wattpad, do they all mention right at the beginning, brought to you by?
And then if we promote something, it has a promoted tag on it.
Right.
We're very upfront about it. And what we're finding, because we have a younger demographic, I said 25 and under, 30 and under primarily, they get that the internet is free, but the internet isn't actually free. Like they're really smart. In fact, strangely smart. In some cases, they'll figure out things before we do. And so we find that they're not actually adverse to still having amazing click-throughs and all that stuff, to actually reading the stories. And one of the things we follow is people who stick with the story from the first chapter to the end. And that follow-through is still really high, even though often the first chapter is just, hey, Fox and I are working together on this. So.
I want to thank everyone. And just in closing, we've got just a couple minutes left. Invite everybody. I think everybody in the panel will be up here for a few minutes if you want to continue the conversation. But just in closing, I think I forget who was it, Aaron or Tim, had said something about, oh yeah, this is, in 6 months, it'll be something else. So just in closing, we'll start with Benjamin. What's going to be in 6 months? What are we looking for in 2015? Where is this going? Either the issues, or what's one thing you could give to the audience to say they should be thinking about to take away from this audience or this session?
I always look at it as the way the water flows, right? So in this case, the water is money. And money is flowing from the advertisers. And if they get better performance from native advertising, they're going to continue to apply pressure that they want more scalability from this. That's going to lead to more innovation, more companies, you know, coming up with that. And there will ultimately be some, you know, just amalgamation of these companies ultimately in the next, 5 to 10 years. So I will expect that, having dynamic targetable content in the well is going to happen in a mass scale, and having the ability to create better content in mass is also going to happen.
I think we'll probably have another panel a year from now and talk about the same thing. But
welcome, come back.
I just think that everyone's trying to, it's got to be authentic, and I think that's the thing. Just keep in mind that if you're actually authentic about it, it'll work. Yeah. Right. So if you're trying to be covert, then it's people will figure it out, and people will think that you're shitty as an advertiser, which means you wasted your money. But I think that it's really interesting if it's brands bringing you content, there's nothing new about that. And I think if you're just upfront about it and it's actually content, it's not, you know, like designed to be an ad, then I think they'll have success and they'll continue to do it. But, you know,
I don't
I'm just allowed to listen to everyone and say yes to them.
no,
I think, you know, the ideas around scalability is a really important one, you know, especially when you deal with influencers. It's something we deal with all the time. But what I think we're going to see a lot of over this year, and we're already seeing it, is brands who want to advertise in these networks, trusting the network and saying, look, I can get you to the right people, but let us help you get there. Like, don't take complete control over this content. If you could do it yourself, you wouldn't have come to us in the first place. And I think that's what we're finding really interesting, that people are willing to give control to the networks to help them create authentic content instead of them coming to us and going, oh yeah, this is authentic. My copy team wrote it. Yeah, no, my guys made this video. It's totally authentic because we made it.
and how is that any different than advertising against a show on NBC? I trust NBC to make programming that I can associate my brand.
Exactly.
Same thing.
Yep.
Great. Tim?
Native is here to stay, whatever we want to call it. But I think the 2015 is the year of programmatic. That is the hot button du jour right now. And it's just every medium possible will be tried to be pushed into a programmatic, which I agree with. From a frictionless buying point of view, that's great. But I think the point you guys are making around trusting the publishers, the one-to-one guaranteed relationship type media buys will be heavily pushed into programmatic, and broadcast is coming back. Google tried this, 5+ years ago, maybe even more with radio. But I think the world's kind of ready for this idea of programmatic media buying with broadcast as well. So whatever format it's coming.
And I'll answer the question from the perspective of Federated Media, which is known as one of the founders, pioneers of content marketing. And this company is investing a lot more money, time, and energy into video. So I think going into 2015, you'll see a lot more of this native advertising in video, and you'll see it a lot more at scale.
I agree. Video advertising is the lifeblood of the internet right now. It's what pays for everything. Most of it is pre-roll. And 50% of the video that is advertised on the internet is not seen by a human being. That's how much fraud there is. So I would say that next year you're going to start to see much more transparency, much more cleaning up this town than you've seen in the past. And as all that takes place, I think that's great for those of us who are really in the branded content space, which is the smaller part of this. For all this excitement around it, it's really a small subset of pre-roll, which is much smaller than television. So I think as the transparency increases, the fraud decreases a little bit, you'll see more room for this stuff to grow.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody. We're up on the time. So I want to thank everybody and thank the great panel. It was great with everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you next year to have the same conference.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, we have. Tell them I said hi.
We could probably
Hi. Hi, nice to meet you, Dave.